All right there, Liam here. Regular listeners will be like, what the fuck? Where's the theme tune? Where's the band sponsorship of the podcast? I fucking hate change. Starters, just calm down, my friend. You're going to like this because our buddies at 2000 Trees Festival want to give you 10% off. Well, not you particular, just you, everyone listening to this podcast. 2000 Trees Festival takes place from the 6th to the 9th of July in Cheltenham. For people who don't know geography of the UK, it's only a couple of hours from London. This year's headliners are Idols, Thrice and Jimmy World. The lineup also includes one of my favourite bands at the moment, Knocked Loose, and friends of the pod, Laura Jane Grace, Chubby and the Gang, Anti-Flag and Pup. I want to let you know that I'm taking no money to promote this festival. I'm doing it because 2000 Trees is a truly independent rock festival and it's fucking fun, a great space to hang out, and that's why it's won a shit ton of awards. You can even go back to episode 16 of this podcast where I spoke to James Scarlett, one of the founders of 2000 Trees Festival. So if you're searching for an outside festival this summer with a killer lineup, then let's all go hang out at 2000 Trees from the 6th to the 9th of July. So how do you get the 10% off your tickets? Well, quite simply, all you need to do is use the promo code PUNKSINPUBS, one word, at checkout. Once again, use the promo code PUNKSINPUBS, one word, at checkout. Right, back to normality. Everyone calm down. It is okay.
Oi, this is Jay from the Punk Ethics Collective, and you are listening to the fantastic Punks in Pubs podcast. Liam and the gang have invited us on for a bit of DIY sponsorship, updating you on what Punk Ethics are up to before we settle in for another cracking conversation with another punk legend. We launched our campaign Punks Against Sweatshops a few years ago now, and after a few pandemic-related delays, we are finally bringing it to the stage with a live gig at the legendary 100 Club on London's Oxford Street on the 19th of March. We have some of the fine punks that are involved in the campaign performing, including Petrol Girls, Steve Ignorant, Slice of Life, Oi Polloi and In Evil Hour, as well as the punk poet Paul Case, aka Captain of the Rant, and comedy activist legend and secret punk rocker himself, Mark Thomas. Tickets are on sale at wegottickets.com. Grab yours now before they're gone. That's all from me. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Cheers.
Take back the land! Take back the land! Take back the land! Take back the land!
Hello and welcome to the Punks in Pubs podcast. My name is Liam Bird and I am here to distract you from the fuckery that is going on in the world at the moment. As I record, Russia have decided to fully invade Ukraine. Thoughts go out to all the people of Ukraine because that's what they need right now, isn't it? Thoughts. Fuck me. This podcast is meant to be a distraction from all parts of life of what's going on, and I hope it has helped people during COVID. I know it has. People have reached out to me. However, I don't think this podcast can help you during shelling of a war. This shouldn't fucking laugh. But let's give it a go. You know, you never know. People might rally around a podcast and see hope in it. You never know. I can remember Fat Mike said a revolution will happen through a podcast. I mean, that fucker's got a podcast now as well, so you never know. It might be him. It might be him who brings about world peace. I doubt it. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who wants to bring around world peace, but you never know. He might. You never know. Anyway, let's move on in a true Mark Maron style tone change and subject matter. If you don't listen to Mark Maron, none of that will make sense to you. You may have noticed at the start of the podcast that we are supporting 2000 Trees Festival. We are doing this. Why I'm saying we? I'm doing this because the festival were there at the early stages of this podcast to offer support. So we are doing the same now. If you have not got your tickets yet, you can get 10% off your tickets using the promo code PunksInPubs, but I'll talk about that in a second. What I want to tell you is that the festival on social media are doing a thing called 7 Days of Trees, whereabouts they are releasing the name of bands who are playing the festival. So go and give them a follow on social media at 2000 Trees, the number 2000, and see if there's any band who have been announced that you are stoked to go and watch. One of the bands who didn't get announced in the 7 Days of Trees but have been announced are Turnstile, one of the fucking greatest bands going at this point in time. I watched them recently in London and their show was fucking phenomenal. So if you get the opportunity to go and watch Turnstile, you go watch Turnstile. If you get the opportunity to watch Turnstile in a festival, go and do it. The opportunity to do that is at 2000 Trees Festival that takes place from the 7th of July over that weekend. You can do that with 10% off your ticket. So as you go to 2000 Trees website, put in Punks in Pubs at checkout and you will get 10% off because we are friends. Right, let's crack on with my guest for this episode. He is the bassist of The Damned. His name is Paul Gray. So I sat down with Paul via Zoom after COVID really fucked up our original plans to talk in September 2021. It was great to finally get the opportunity to talk to him. And the reason I wanted to talk to Paul wasn't originally, I didn't go to him saying, hey, let's talk about The Damned and punk rock. I approached him and said, hey, let's talk about veg and herbs. Because Paul created a YouTube show talking about how you can grow veg in your garden or on your windowsill to take your mind away from COVID. And I did just that. And for people who may have listened to other episodes, I spoke about how my garden really helped me during lockdown mentally. So we talk about that, but obviously we talk about music as well. We talk about how staring up at a stage at a 20-something Lemmy inspired him to pick up the bass. We talk about his times with other bands away from The Damned, including UFO, Professor and the Madmen, and his brief stint with Andrew Ridley, formerly of Wham. Paul also talks about his time touring with Eddie and the Hot Rods, in particular when he went on tour with the Ramones. Great story there coming up. Paul also opens up about living with tinnitus and how having to put down his bass because of his hearing damage took him to a very dark period of time in his life. Of course, we talk about The Damned, the recording process, touring, and then also eventually leaving and then rejoining. I'll be back after my chat with Paul, but until then, enjoy. What I can only assume is a very stormy, very rainy Cardiff for people listening from outside the UK. We're currently getting battered by 80 to 90 miles an hour winds. You were just saying that you've just had like a small pot knock over. That's it.
It's called Storm Eunice, EU. It's the EU getting us back. All a conspiracy.
This ain't the Joe Rogan podcast. We're not going down that route. I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about The Damned. We're going to talk about Hot Rods. And of course, we're going to talk about when you try to make Andrew Ridley into a rock band. But before we start talking about any of that, I want to talk about
Failed miserably on that one.
I want to talk about gardening, because that some people listening to this may have already clicked off, and I hope they are kind of sticking around. We will talk about the good stuff that is punk. But you and other members of the band created a YouTube channel a while back called The Damn Show, and during COVID lockdown in the UK, you started to create a gardening content for the YouTube channel called Punk Rock Planting. The premises was to show that anyone can plant veg and herbs, even if you didn't really have a garden. And this is why I reached out to you originally, because I reached out and I told you that by watching you doing your gardening kind of inspired me to actually use the garden I've got in my backyard, because I'm very fortunate to have that space during lockdown. And I really got into gardening. I found it weirdly becoming quite obsessive and finding it as like a way to kind of really cleanse my mind of all the rest of the crap that's going on in the world. I mean, was that the reason why you started it for yourself, was just to step away and do something you love?
I started doing it when I got tinnitus, actually 27, 28 years ago. Actually, probably more than that. It was a kind of good way to try and tune out from it. You know, you're outside and you would doing stuff and it wasn't noisy and you tended to just kind of get lost in it. And I just found it, you know, quite relaxing and chilling. It was, you know, it was quite fun planting stuff and watching it not die.
That is a big part.
Yeah, and then eating it, even better.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I'm a guy who does not like my veg. I would try and push that shit around my plate until I get all my good stuff, and then I'll go back to the veg. But I did find myself, because I growed it, I found myself eating more veg because I created it. It's like from a seed to on my table, it was like some real form of achievement. And you get weirdly euphoric when you see, like, I was growing courgettes and you just see like your first courgette like proper growing. It's like, oh, wow, I've done that.
And then you can't stop them. They just keep on growing.
Well, yeah, potatoes, never getting rid of those fuckers. They just sprout up. Even when you think you've got them all out, you'll find another one and they'll grow next year.
The nice thing is, you know, you just buy a packet of seeds for £1 or £2, plant them, and most of them come up, you know, and you don't need a massive plot of acreage. You can just bung them in a pot or a grow bag or something, and they taste so much nicer than the stuff you buy in the supermarkets, you know, because all the greengrocers have gone. I'm old enough to remember greengrocers. £3 of King Edward's, my good man, and some of those excellent Kelvedon peas, you know. You can grow them yourself now. But I did that because I think the band's managers said, you know, let's try and create something to keep things ticking over and engaged with the punters and stuff, you know. And I didn't really know what to do. So I just thought, well, one thing I can do in this scenario is get out my garden and potter about. So I just thought I'd get out my garden and potter about and film it.
Were you surprised by the feedback that you got from people?
I've had more feedback on that than for my bass playing. I'm in the wrong career.
There you go. You got a second job in gardener's world. Yeah.
No, I was actually. I still get. I mean, you know, I still get people mention it a couple of years later, and it's really good. You know, if you can, you know, introduce people to the joys of getting out there and, you know, getting a bit of air and growing stuff that you can eat that isn't full of pesticides and, you know, and all that stuff that most of our veg are doused in now. You know, and unless they're organic, which are heinously expensive, then it was, it was a good thing to do. But I was quite surprised, and I'm just glad that, you know, enough people liked it to make it worthwhile doing.
No emails from Alan Titchmarsh or anything like that saying?
No offers from Channel 4 to have my own punk rock planting show. No, I'm still there, Channel 4, if you're listening. Probably not what else going on.
I was going to say, as a man whose livelihood is like partly based on getting up in front of a live audience and performing, I mean, how did you take the lockdown? Like, how difficult was it for you? Not financially, but like just emotionally.
I mean, I live out in the country anyway. I live out in the sticks. So I'm used to being quite solitary. I kind of like being quite solitary. But the hardest thing was not going to see my girlfriend, who lives sort of 30 miles away. And there was 2 coppers living in the little road she lives in. So it was a bit difficult. But for the first bit, I kind of quite liked it. You know, I like walking the roads without people trying to knock me over or off their bike and, you know, without seeing the contrails up. And it was quite good. But after 3 months, you start getting itchy feet. You think, oh, when's this bloody thing going to end? I mean, luckily, I'm kind of quite self-contained. You know, when I'm not on a stage, I do the opposite. I get out the garden, I go out on a bike for hours and then go up, stomping up the hills around where I live. So it wasn't that bad to start with. The worst thing is, seeing the months on end looming where, you should have been in America or Australia or something, and you're not. You kind of stuck at home. So, but luckily I was finishing off. Well, actually, just started a record with Captain, the last Sensible Grey Cells album, and we started it just before lockdown hit. Oh, it's all very hazy now, isn't it? It's just been so mad. A couple of years ago, anyway.
Yeah.
So we continued with that. I mean, like most people, musicians know, I've got Logic on my MacBook, and that's my recording studio. So Captain and I were able to continue writing that album. Most of it was written on our laptops, pinging files to and fro of songs, and he'd send me stuff and I put keyboards and bass in it. I send him stuff, he put keyboards and guitar in it. And we just kept swapping ideas and writing stuff for, potentially for any new damn stuff that might be on the horizon. So I knocked a website up. I thought, well, I can't keep on with, if I'm not touring, I'm not earning any money. I don't get paid from anything else, get paid a session fee for doing the damn stuff, and that's it. So that was looking a bit grim. I can't live on nothing except courgettes. So I knocked a website out called Paul Gray Bass Online and just sort of punched myself about for session work, online session work. And I got really interesting stuff come in. I mean, stuff from Czechoslovakia, project a guy was doing in America with David Bowie's keyboard player, a kind of a jazzy thing, Matt Webster from the Midlands, stuff from like all over. So that was fun, and that kept me busy. And then towards the end of it, I can't really talk about it at the moment because it's not been announced, but I got another project going with 3 guys from bands of a similar ilk and era to myself, which is really exciting. And we've just finished an album, and we've just got to finish and get the deal sorted for that. So more news on that over the next few months. So I've actually kept myself busy.
It's kind of interesting. You spoke about like finding a deal to put out the album. I mean, you've been doing music though, or performing music like at a very early age. What differences are there now, like from trying to find a label? Because I think a lot of people think, well, why do you need a label now? Like, just do it yourself.
I'm too old to do it myself. My son, who's 17, he just raises his eyebrows when I ask anything and just sort of tuts, slinks out the room. Yeah, you can do it yourself, but you still got to have, some sort of distribution. And with this particular project, we're lucky that we had a couple of labels kind of up for it from the off. And the one we've just ended up with, I've just been speaking to them today about, the next step forward. It's really quite exciting. I mean, they basically we've done it. We own all the rights. We've done the recording, and again, we've done it all. I mean, I'd never worked with 2 of the guys before. Worked with one of them. The other 2, one I knew, one the guitarist I knew. The other guitarist and singer I didn't know. I knew his band very well, but not him. And so we did it all over Zoom, and we did it all swapping files on our laptops. And that's the beauty. I mean, that's why I'm not kind of quite such a Luddite. You get pretty adept at recording stuff and pinging it to and fro. But we just needed a label to put it out, so we've done that.
Are you spoken about like file sharing and stuff like that? That am I right in saying that's like essentially what you've been doing with Fess and the Madmen? And for people who don't know, this is a band with former members of Adolescence, DI, and a former drummer of the damned Rat Scabies. I mean, this is something you've been doing for quite a while, so it's not like a new thing. It's something that you've kind of adapted to quite early in kind of like the technology age.
Well, I first started doing it with the first Grey Cells album when Captain came down here, and we did it on this table, my kitchen table, basically. And he had a MacBook, and my old laptop was dying, so I got a MacBook as well. Just started off on GarageBand, and I still use GarageBand up until a couple of years ago. It's perfectly fine for doing bass, and keyboards. You don't need any kind of much, awful dust on that stuff. Yeah, I mean, that was 2011, 2012. And the same, you're absolutely right, with the Madmen. That's how I've done it with them, just pinging file. They'll send me what Rat's done on the drums. They'll send me a couple of guitar tracks, vocal track, a mix of everything. It's got keyboards in. I fly it into Logic on my MacBook here, and I can sort of mix, the drums up and down or guitars up and down, do, 5, 10, 20, 50 different bass tracks until I'm happy with one. Send a bunch back to them so they can pick and choose what they want. Great way of doing it.
Do you miss the studio, though?
I miss the camaraderie of the studio, if there is any camaraderie in the studio. I'll leave it at that. It's nice to swap ideas about in real time, and it's nice to create something with 3 or 4 people in a room all coming from the same kind of mindset. It's a bit more difficult when you're isolated, but you get used to doing that. That's what you get used to doing. In a way, it's not much different from the way that all the session musicians did it in the 60s. They didn't know what they were going to do. They came in, they were given the music, and they kind of interpreted it off the top of their head. I mean, I miss going to Rockfield, because Rockfield was just immense fun. You could get away with anything at Rockfield. It was a good, fun place to be. But the nice thing about doing it like this is you haven't got one eye on a clock. You haven't got the producer getting a bit antsy because he wants to get home to feed his baby or something. If you want to knock out a track at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can. That's why I enjoy doing it. And I can do as many bass takes as I want to without people saying, right, that's quite enough, Gray, now bugger off and let someone else do something. I've embraced it because you have to embrace it. Otherwise, I'd have done bugger all for the last 10 years, really. Apart from a few times I've been back with the Damned in the studio.
Gonna break out of your city, leave the people here behind. Searching for adventure is the type of life to find. Tired of doing day jobs with no thanks for what I do. I'm sure I must be someone, now I'm gonna find out too. Why don't you ask them what they expect from you? Why don't you tell them?
Well, let's talk about a time before COVID was a twinkle in a bat's eye. You grew up around Southend-on-Sea in Essex, and I've read from some interviews where actually you said a single gig kind of changed your life, and that was watching Hawkwind. For people who don't know, Hawkwind had a bass player named Lemming. That one from the Motorhead. What was it like watching kind of a guy like that at the early stages? Did you think, this guy's clearly gonna make it? Because Lemming's been around for quite a while. He was roadieing and he was doing other gigs as well.
Well, he didn't look like he lived in Leigh-on-Sea, where I live, that's for sure. None of them did, which was the lure of it, because where I'm from, Leigh-on-Sea, it's a very nice little place. It's an old fishing village, but it was suburbia. My mate's dads, they probably worked up in London in a bank or something. And the thought of getting up at 6:30 every morning and getting the train at 7:30 and doing that every day of your life was just awful. I was only 13, I think, when I saw Hawkwind. I went by myself. It was a revelation because it was a Space Ritual tour, and had Stacia dancing, and they had, the ludicrously brilliant light show. Can you imagine at 13 when you're just sort of used to watching your neighbours mow the lawn every Sunday morning and wash the car? This was kind of a completely new, different world. It was quite dangerous and it was quite exciting and it was quite revelatory. And, I love the shape of his bass, which is still the reason I play Rickenbacker. I just love the shape even more than the sound. A lot of it, that stuff is down to aesthetics for me. I'm kind of quite big on aesthetics. Even if it sounds shit and looks good, I'll play it. So, yeah, I mean, that was the kind of the awakening for me. And then, I bought the records and I like the way he constructed his bass lines. It was kind of part rhythm, part lead, and a bit of bass. That kind of set me off on the path, really. You know, if it wasn't for him, I may well not have had the career that I've had.
Did you ever get the opportunity to speak to him and tell him this?
Yeah, I have, yeah. Loads of times, yeah.
And I mean, is he a guy who takes compliments well, or is he just like, I don't care?
I do remember the first time I met him when early 76 or late 75, and I was at age 16, and we were playing with Dingwalls with the new Hot Rods, and he was in the audience. And our manager came back, so somebody you might like to meet out there, and he took me out, and there was Lemmy sort of lounging against the post by the fruit machines. You know, he loved all that rock and roll stuff, you know, and you know the MC5 and all the stuff, the stuff I was being introduced to. But I always found him really approachable, and of course, you know, he hung out with the Damned a lot, and then later on they toured a lot together.
So how did you go from a kid who's locking up at the stage to picking up the bass and playing in Eddie and Hot Rods? I mean, what was that transition? Was it a case that you were just trying other bands, loads of bands, and just trying to make it, or was it a case of
the first band I auditioned for? I had a band with some mates, Crimson Sunset. There you go. I remember the name. I don't think I've ever told anybody else that before. Just came back to me. We're a couple of mates at school, and we did one gig at Tilbury Dockers Club when they had all the big container ships at Tilbury. "'Cause I Love You" by Slade was one song we did. I think Little Wing was another. Anyway, we did one gig, and that was it. But the Hot Rods was the first band that I joined, you know, and that was purely by luck. Just by seeing that in the back of a local paper, summoning up the courage to phone it up, and then being asked down for audition the next day at Dr. Feelgood's place on Canvey Island. And, you know, I was lucky enough to get the nod for it. And it went from there, you know, incredibly lucky, right place, right time.
The band itself, it probably never went off in like success chart wise. I mean, you had success, but it wasn't like it was going to set you for life. However, you got the opportunity to tour, and I'm kind of interested to know, you went to America in 77 and toured with two iconic bands in the Talking Heads and the Ramones. And when you go on a tour like that at such a young age, not knowing what your future holds, are you like, fuck it, I'm just going to go crazy, I'm never going to come to America and tour again like this, like just go big? Or were you kind of like, this is business, I'm focused. I want to make this is going to be my career. I want to look respectable. Yeah. How was it like going to America at such a young age, touring with these two bands?
Well, it was definitely I mean, we knew fuck all about the business. I mean, why would you want to know about that? Which we all rue the day now that we thought like that. But no, I mean, we're like kids in a candy shop. Why wouldn't you be? You know, 17, 18, 19, and you get thrown into a 56 dates in 52 days from coast to coast in America. You fill your boots as much you can in every sense of the word. And again, you know, coming from pretty laid back place like Southend, a pretty kind of middle class background into the delights of American hedonism was something that we all fully embraced. And why not?
I mean, what was it like touring with a band like the Ramones, who play like nearly 30 songs in an hour set and keep things really tight, to like seeing a showman like David from the Talking Heads? Are you looking at their stagecraft and going, I'm going to take parts of what they've done and bring it with myself as you come back to
never
UK?
Never thought like that. No, don't think anybody in the Hot Rods. We treated the whole thing as one massive laugh from start to finish. There was never trying to be like anybody. That was the great thing about the Hot Rods. There was no master plan behind it, unlike some bands I could mention.
We'll get to them, don't worry.
Popular punk groups that absolutely no guiding hands, you know, no machinations. Much like the Damned, you know, that's the reason I really love the Damned, because they were untamable as well. We did totally our own thing. The Ramones and the Talking Heads, I think they all thought we were animals. Because we were. I forget a lot of it, but we fully embraced the rock and roll lifestyle, just put it that way. Every band that I played with, or we played with, until the Damned, we were far more over the top than any of them. The Damned were the exception. UFO were pretty lively as well later on, but You know, I was lucky that all the bands have been you know, very individual and kind of unique in their own way. But no, I was never really copying anybody at all.
Am I right in saying that Barry Masters nearly contributed to giving Joey Ramone third-degree burns?
Joey had a cold one night, and I remember it was in the theatre in Passaic, New Jersey, this lovely big old theatre, and he had a cold or flu or something. They were in the dressing room next to me. He was coughing his guts up, and Barry goes, "Oh, I got to sort the bloke out. I can't fucking go on stage like that." So he went and he said, "Hey, Joe," he said, "get a towel, mate, get a kettle, boil some water up, and put the towel over your head. Breathe in the steam, you know, that'll clear all that gunk in your nose and help clear your throat and everything." So Joe goes, "Oh, yeah, thanks, man." You know. And anyway, he gets hold of a kettle or something. And then 10 minutes later, we hear these sort of screams from next door. What the hell's going on in there? And Barry goes, have a look in, and he said, "You dozy fucker." He said, "You're not meant to keep your head over the kettle when it's boiling. You meant just breathe in the steam." And he was sat there with the steam like blistering all his face up. I suppose indirectly he was responsible for giving him, I don't think they were third-degree burns, but he certainly had a few blisters on his head. Perhaps not the brightest sparks in the packet, but nice enough. I remember another night, I forget where it was, Dee Dee was at the front of the stage and he did his 1, 2, 3, 4 thing, you know. He went to hit the strings and missed and fell.
I want to very quickly talk about a UK quiz show called Nevermind the Buzzcocks. For people outside the UK, this was probably one of the most brutal TV quiz shows that were going at the time. And the comedians used to destroy the contestants who came on. And you were part of it with Barry as members of the Hot Rods. And the idea was that they had to guess who you were.
Residing under Where Are They Now?
Kind of, yeah. So, I mean, how did you take that? Did you find it like insulting, or did you just go, fuck it? It's a laugh, innit? Let's just go and see what happens.
We got royally pissed in the green room with Mark Lamar and what's his name, Sean. He's dead now. Sean, Irish comedian.
Yeah.
Before the show, it's like everything we did, we just approached it as a complete laugh.
Let's kind of move on to the Damned then, because you've spoken before about being a fan of the band before you joined them, but you don't necessarily enjoy the punk scene. You've kind of vaguely touched on the Pistols and the Clash a little bit. What was it about the Damned, in your opinion, that made them stand out from those other kind of major bands as they're seen now?
They were just absolutely real. They were the same on stage as off stage. You know, there was no master plan. They were just incendiary, and I really liked them as people. You know, they were absolutely genuine in everything that they did. I love the music. You know, I love the songs. I love the way they played, and I love their attitude. It was, just a sensational band. I used to go and see them all the time. You know, and Rat and Captain would come and see the Hot Rods, and we'd trade insults with each other. You know, on and off stage, and you know, we're all good mates.
So were you there like at the start, like kind of those 100 Club days in like 76? Were you there around that time?
Well, yeah, the Hot Rods were the first band to be called punk. Whatever you think punk is, you know, yeah. What is punk? You know, everybody's got a different interpret. Punk to me is the Kinks. Punk to me is the Chocolate Watch Band, all those Nuggets bands. You know, they were called punk. So were the Dolls and Iggy Pop in 72, and then so was Lou Reed. You know, it wasn't, the actual word or term wasn't anything new.
I don't really like asking that question, what do you think punk is? Because you're right, I think everyone has their own interpretation. But for me, I would even say that like Helter Skelter by the Beatles is for me probably one of my favourite punk tracks, because I think it's just crazy at the time when it was released. They've never done anything like that. And to me, that's punk. Like a band that decides to do something a little different out there, not knowing what's going to happen. That's pretty punk.
There's a clip of Joe Strummer who read a thing a little bit in Time Out, I think. It's on YouTube. And he said, the first time I heard punk is when I saw this thing about Edging the Hot Rods. And they said, punk rock band. And he said, what is this punk? What is this thing called punk? And he had a band called the 101ers at the time. We played with them at this great old pub called the Nashville in Earls Court, Kensington. I think one week we'd headline and next week they'd headline. And that was in October 75, before Joe, you know, saw the Pistols and said, that's it, I'm going to now form a punk band. You know, it was all... so, yeah, I mean, I was there right from the beginning, which is why I look on with wry amusement at a lot of people's comments about the whole thing, because it's not all entirely correct. You know, there's a lot of journalistic nonsense talked about the whole thing.
What in particular do you think is nonsense?
The term punk was, I think it was Caroline Coon or Nick Kent or Judy Birchall and Tony Parsons and all that kind of got hold of the term, as journalists do. You know, they like to put things in little boxes. And to me, music is music, if you like. It's all rock and roll. It's all the same three bloody chords. You know, there's a lot of unnecessary kind of stuff talked about it. You know, you go back, you listen, like the Beatles were three chords, Chuck Berry was three chords, Kinks, you know, again, the Kingsmen, I think a fantastic kind of example of a garagey punk, but kind of garagey stuff to me. It was when the kind of machinations, you know, got in the way of everything, and it became more of a fashion thing than about the music. And then it turned into Oi, which I absolutely hated. I like pop songs, you know, I've always liked melody. That's one thing that has gone through the thread of all of us in the Damned, you know, me, Dave, Captain and Rat, you know, we like melody, you know, melody and energy. And that's the kind of the one common thing. Well, the main thing that I share with Captain is that kind of like of all those 60s bands and Dave as well.
So you left the Hot Rods in 1980 to join the Damned. Touring with the Damned, I can only guess what that was like. I mean, I've heard stories of basically rat scabies being obsessed with setting things on fire. What is it like touring with unpredictable characters, I suppose, is a way to frame it.
Well, you wonder whether you're going to, you know, wake up dead one morning. It was pretty on the edge, but that, you know, for the best part, that was part of the joy of it. It was not a boring lifestyle. Anything could happen, and frequently did, both on and off stage. So, you know, it was the best education a young man can have, I think, being in that group. You know, you grow up and learn a lot quickly, being surrounded by those characters and the other characters in your kind of in your orbit.
What do you think was like the best lesson you learned during your original time with the Damned?
Have eyes in the back of your head. At all times, you could write a book on it. It's impossible to say. It was. Everybody knows what the characters in the Damned were like at that particular time, so it doesn't take too much imagination to figure out what it was like being surrounded by them pretty much 24 hours a day. It was lively, is the best way to describe it.
So the first album you recorded with the band was the Black Album, an album that has one of my favourite songs of all time, and that's Wait for the Blackout. I adore that track. The album itself still had its punk sound with Hit and Miss, Sick of This and Drinking with My Baby, but it definitely started seeing the band shift musical tones. I mean, the last track of the album, Curtain Call, 17-minute like kind of prog rock epic. I mean, what was there any like nervousness within the band making that kind of genre shift?
The Damned never got nervous about a single thing in all the time that I've been with them. We just did what we wanted to do, which again goes back to why I really like the Damned, because there was nobody saying, you've got to make a record like this, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Didn't happen. Nobody could tell the Damned what to do. It was fantastic. So we just did what we wanted to, and we were lucky to be with Chiswick Records, who basically gave us enough rope, and luckily we didn't hang ourselves with it. We all wrote songs, you know, we all wrote stuff, and we all swapped it about, and we went in and we knocked it out, and what we thought worked best ended up on the record, which is why it was so diverse and eclectic.
As a musician, you want to be creative. I mean, what was it like being in kind of that group of people whereabouts they also have the same idea of, let's just fuck around with shit, let's just see what we get? You've been in multiple bands. Like, have you been in a situation since that whereabouts you've had the opportunity kind of just play around because the rest of the guys in the band have the same kind of ideology of, fuck it, let's just see what we create?
Probably not. No. I mean, we had a fair bit of that with UFO, but it was more channeled. The Damned was... The great thing about the Damned was we could write anything and play any way we wanted to. And it's why the Black Album especially, it was an immensely creative time. Just very, very lucky that we all kind of gelled at that particular time together. You know, we'd go down to the pub, have a good few bevies, come back and just play all night, basically. We experimented. There was harpsichords there was grand pianos, there was tubular bells. We got people play brass down. It was like, well, let's try anything. Why stick to, just guitar? And, lucky enough, we got away with it and people liked it. But you can't really define creativity. It's just something that happens when you've got people who are in the right frame set, working, bouncing off each other. It's something that I can't put a finger on it. It just works beautifully.
Don't you ask me to come out, or when the sun does shine, let us stay here with curtains drawn, the darkness don't be mine. Let's wait for the blackouts, the light is too bright. Let's wait for the blackouts, wait for the night. Well, welcome to...
So you toured the album and you came back into the studio and you recorded Strawberries. I mean, what changed between those two records for you to go, I'm going? Because you've essentially leaving money on the table, a relatively steady gig. That's a big decision. I mean, what happened for you to have to clean your hands of the whole thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was leaving money on the table.
Okay.
There was never much money about in the Damned. It was just time for change.
But I mean, was you like psychologically tired? Was it like creatively tired?
The dynamics in the band have changed, as they do in lots of bands over the years. There have been various situations that were unnecessary. They've been well documented. I'm not going to rake over them anymore. And I just thought, bugger it. It wasn't as much fun as it had been. The whole reason I was doing it really was for fun. And the whole reason I still do it really is for fun, because it's a great way to try and earn a living. I put in try there because it's not always that easy. Why stick around if you're unhappy? I up sticks and join UFO.
During that period then, was it a case of I'm leaving and then open up your little black book and find another project? Or are you kind of working in the background going, I know I'm going to leave, I need another gig, let's do things in the back channels?
Oh, I can't remember. I think I just reached the stage. I thought, fuck it, this isn't the fun it used to be. It was all getting, fair bit of grief going on in the background. And so at the same time, I got a call from the UFO guitarist who I knew because he lived in Cardiff, where I live near there. And he said, we need our bass player's going back to America. We're doing this world tour. Do you fancy joining us? So I did. It was as simple as that.
What's it like going into a band that you know is not your band? Like, is it like the first day of school? Like you coming in a bit sheepish and you're finding your way?
I really get nervous. It takes a lot to get me nervous. But that was pretty nerve-wracking because I only knew Paul Chapman, a guitarist. I mean, obviously I knew the band UFO, but I didn't really know any of their songs apart from Doctor Doctor, which was on every pub jukebox. They weren't on my radar or two, but I knew Paul really well, and I liked him, and we used to go out and get happily drunk together in Cardiff and raise a bit of merry hell. Went to see their manager up in London, and he just gave me a bunch of albums and said, learn this, here's a ticket, your plane goes tomorrow. And I flew out, and the first show they were playing was this massive great sports arena somewhere in Spain. It was huge. And I thought, it kind of hit me, Jesus Christ, this is massive. And I just spent a week on tour with them. They had a bloke called Billy Sheehan playing bass. Pete Wade left and Billy joined. Billy's a brilliant bass player, but he was a bit too flowery for UFO. They needed somebody a bit rootsier. The strongest thing he ever took was a black coffee, which wasn't really on the radar of UFO in the list of stimulants. So he'd had enough after a couple of weeks. And I just spent a week on tour with them, learning the songs based on from watching them play. They were playing 2 nights of this arena in Athens, but he played one night and I played the second night. And on the second night, Phil, the singer, had pretty much a nervous breakdown on stage. I mean, they've been touring for 5, 6, 7 years non-stop, and they were pretty kind of shattered from it all. You know, bit of this to keep them up awake, a bit of that to get to sleep, and it all got a bit much. And then the bottles started coming and the coins started coming. I thought it's like being back in the bloody damn hell, this stuff being lobbed on the stage. I thought I got away from all that.
Did you start feeling nostalgic?
Yeah, so the next day we flew back and the band split up. So my world tour was like half a gig in Athens. But anyway, Phil, the singer, went in and got himself together, and we had another 5 years of it. And it was great. I loved them. Lovely people, really, really nice people. To me, as I'd said before, it's all rock and roll. You know, it's all, if it's got melody and I can add something to it, you know, I'll probably like it. I like melody, and there was a lot of melody in UFO. And he used to come down to my house in Cardiff and go, "Yeah, you got any of that old punk stuff you didn't play? You know, that stuff with the Damned." And you go, "Oh, I like that bit." And I had some bits I'd written that were never used, and they ended up on the next UFO album. It was all. It's all the same, you know, 3-4 chords. It's just some bands play it a bit slower with a different melody line on top than others.
So I'm not sure how fondly you remember this bit, though. I mean, tell me about how you tried to help Andrew Ridley, formerly of Wham, kind of create a rock album. I mean, that's a weird transition. I mean, how did that even come about?
Yeah, it was a bit weird. Well, a mate of mine worked in an advertising agency in London, and so did a bloke who played guitar, who was a session player, and he happened to be working on Andrew Ridgeley's album. Wham had split, and Sony, in their infinite wisdom, had offered Andrew the same deal as George Michael. Clearly blissfully unaware that one of them was pretty talented and the other was possibly rather less so. He said, "Oh, we're looking for Andrew, looking for a bass player. He wants somebody that's got a bit of a hard-edged rock style." And my mate even said, "Oh, I know somebody, Paul, you know, played with the Damned and UFO." So I got a call a few days later from one of Andrew's 3 managers. He had 3 of them. Johnny Fowler. Hello, Paul. Johnny Fowler here, Andrew's manager. And he phoned up 2 or 3 times, but before I actually spoke to him, because I thought it was a mate. Who is this? Who is it? Who is it? I didn't think anybody would phone me up, I suppose, with Andrew Ridgeley. I mean, who would? So I just thought it was somebody taking a piss and put the phone down. Until eventually I copped on. And yeah, I mean, I went up to London and to it was Jethro Tull's studio, Maison Rouge. And there was no one there. And I walked in the studio, and the desk was strewn with like AC/DC and Enough's Enough and Black Sabbath and Def Leppard CDs. I thought, this is the wrong studio here. So I went out and asked the reception girl. She said, no, that's Andrew's studio. I thought, what the fuck's going on here? And he wanted to make a rock record, you know, hence me being roped in. So I ended up going to Japan with him for a couple of weeks and doing all these videos. And I think it sold, 4 copies, possibly. It was direct family. But it paid handsomely. It was the most I've got paid for least work ever.
Do you have a copy of the album? Do you still have it?
No.
I'm going to get people to dig it
It's on YouTube. There's Japanese TV. Because we went over to Japan. We were there for something like 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, all on Sony Records at this, stupidly posh hotel, being taking these stupidly posh clubs every night, and everything was charged to Sony. And all we did is work one day at the end, doing these endless, the same 2 songs, Red Dress and something else, in this club in Tokyo. And each television, instead of going to televisions to do the miming, the television stations came to the club. And they all came in and set up exactly the same gear and exactly the same lights. You had to hang about while they did it all. And then you'd play the same couple of songs. They'd break it all down. You twiddle your thumbs and another TV lot will come in. This went on for like 12 hours or 14 hours or something on the last day. And the rest of the time, we were just out getting pissed. It was great fun.
She wears a red dress, sex dress, scarlet lips. I want to kiss. She got some first class long legs. It's a sin, and that's my thing.
If you don't mind me asking, if you can talk about kind of your tinnitus, because for people who don't know, it's a kind of it's something whereabouts hearing noises that that are not caused by sound coming from the outside world. So it can sound like ringing, buzzing, whooshing, humming, that kind of stuff. I mean, when did you notice it, and at what point did you think, oh, this could be a legitimate issue for me and how I make a living?
I mean, my ears had rung for ages after shows. You know, you just get used to it. You think, oh, it's all part of the territory. But most of it, the damage was done from wearing those things you've got on, you know, headphones, because I had a T-App Port studio, four-track cassette studio, which we all had back in those days before computers. And I'd be up every night writing songs, putting stuff down. And your ears get tired, you know, and you turn the volume up, you turn the treble up so that everything gets a bit duller, then you turn the mid up. You have a few beers. I didn't know at the time, but alcohol deadens the top end of your hearing as well. So it all started adding up. And so I take the headphones off at, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I'll go to bed, be gone the next day, and then till it's not gone the next day. And then you think, oh, fuck, just crack on with it. And, I was stupid. I ignored it. I monitored far too loudly. I played too loudly. With Steve Nicol and Rat, they were both cymbal merchants, and they both smashed merry head out of their kits. And my right ear was always next to the cymbal, which is my worst ear now. Probably the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, I started noticing it. And what really kicked in, I used to go out with Captain Sensible's Ugly Sods, and we used to go around Europe just for a laugh. We didn't make any money, but we used to get fabulously pissed and just play all these great little clubs in France and Germany and stuff. And there was a club in Germany we played, and there was a new sound system just been installed, and the bloke on the monitor desk clearly didn't know what he was doing. And a couple of songs in there was this huge shriek of feedback, and I just had to be standing right in front of the monitor, and it literally knocked me backwards. I mean, it literally knocked me. I staggered backwards and shoved some bog paper in my ear, but that was the damage done, and my ear's never been the same since.
And have you ever been worried, like, that's it, like I've killed?
Yeah, I stopped playing a few years after that. I mean, from 96, I think, was my last show with The Damned. I didn't really play again until 2014, 15 years later. I couldn't get near a stage in a drum kit. I still really struggle on tour now, but I wear earplugs all the time or in-ear monitors, which kind of helps a bit. But it's really tough. It's not the tinnitus so much. I've got used to that, even though it's 24 hours a day. It's something called hyperacusis, which is an increased sensitivity to certain sounds, which is basically high frequencies. Those sort of noises go right through me. Kids screaming, dogs barking, air brakes, people clapping. My eardrums literally rattle. And that's what frazzles me more than the tinnitus. And of course, when you're on tour, you've got those noises all the time. I have to be pretty careful about managing the noise that I'm subjected to. It's one of the reasons I live out in the sticks. I'm away from the town because towns just do me in, they're too noisy. Can't get on the underground without big bits of wax in my ears in London. Does my head in. I
can't imagine how something you've done all your life and all of a sudden stopping because you have to for your own health. I mean, that must have been
I mean, it was, I had a couple of really black years. It probably contributed to my first divorce because all of a sudden it's what I did. It wasn't just a job or career, it's what I did. I couldn't do any more, and I didn't know what else I could do because everything I'd done had been around music. So I got into a pretty dark place with it, and there's no cure for it. I went through every therapy going, I had all the counselling, I read all the books, I did absolutely everything, and nothing worked. And the only thing that really works when you've got it like I have, it is acceptance. And it took me 10 years to kind of get to that stage. So, and that's kind of really when I got into gardening stuff. I went out and I did a bunch of courses at local college on organic gardening and planting trees and shrubs and that, and went and did some work in these nice old sort of 17th century, 18th century gardens and stuff, just to get away from everything. It wasn't easy, but I got back into it after somebody got me together with Alan Lee Shaw, who played with the Damned for a couple of years, Not of This Earth and that. And we started writing some songs together and did a did an album together called Mischief. We couldn't tour it because of my hearing situation, but that kind of eased me back into it.
How prevalent do you think it is within the music industry, and it's just not really spoken about? Because like you said, it sounds like you had a real tough period with it, and like there must be so many musicians out there who are dealing with what you're dealing with, but don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been put in touch with a few. I don't know anybody in the Hot Rods that had it. As far as I know, nobody in the Damned's got it. I mean, Captain might have it a little bit. Nobody in UFO had it. It's kind of luck of the draw. It's like, you know, you can smoke 20 fags a day and get away with it, or smoke 2 a day and get lung cancer. You can be born with hard or soft eardrums. And if your eardrums are kind of soft, they're more susceptible to hearing damage. It is one of the ways it was explained to me. You know, it's your physiology. Some people are more prone to, you know, medical conditions than others. And I just happened to draw the short straw as far as hearing problems went. But a lot of it was my own fault because I just played too bloody loud. And most of it was done through monitoring. You know, you get a good idea, knocking a song out. Yeah, that's great. Turn it up a little bit. And you turn it up a bit more. And I can remember just turning it up and up and up and up. And at the same time touring, you know, on planes and that, having Walkmans on, having them up to drown out the sound of the engines. I had headphones on a lot. And that's what really did the damage.
So people listen to this podcast, just turn it down a little bit. Save your ears.
I spent 12, 15 years working for the Musicians Union when I ducked out of music. And until I left to rejoin the Damned 4 years ago, I was the regional organiser for Wales and South West England. And I used to go around colleges and sometimes do talked about, you know, the music industry and being a band to students. And I always used to say to them, you know, stick your hands up. The reason I'm here and not up on the ramp is because I fucked my ears. Anybody here who's ever had their ears rattle or ring? And I kid you not, every college I went to, probably six out of 10 kids would put their hands up. And these are kids of 16, 17, maybe 18. And it took me a good 10 years to get that damage, and they're getting it from earbuds. Pretty scary.
I want to start wrapping up now because we've come up to the hour, and I'm very aware.
Yeah, it's getting a bit depressing, isn't it?
Let's keep it light.
I have to get a beer.
So these are the last couple of questions. So you went back to the Damned and you start performing live, and you've gone back into the studio with them and recorded with them. Was it a case of like, absence makes the heart grow fonder? Was that what it was like?
I don't know about that. After doing the Grey Cells album with Captain, I mean, every time the Damned came to Cardiff, I used to go and see them, you know, for the last 20 years. And quite often I'd jump up on stage, go, oh, come on, Paul, come do a song with it. So, you know, we were always kind of, Captain and I were pretty much always in touch. So when he phoned up and said, you know, Stu's left, we're going to New York to do that, or actually it wasn't at New York then, but we're going to do an album probably with Tony Visconti. I know you think we're a bunch of old beeps, but would you be interested in playing bass? I mean, you don't really sort of sit back and think, well, I'll get back to you next week. You know, it went, ooh, sounds good, you know. And within a nanosecond, I said, damn right. It was really good fun because I hadn't met Pinch before. Well, I had met Pinch with a couple of gigs that I jumped up with them, but, you know, I never worked with him. And it was fun, you know, it was really fun going to New York for a couple of weeks and being thrown completely in the deep end because I only got the song sent through about a week before. And I didn't know which songs they were going to do. There was about 20 bits and pieces on there. So yeah, it was great. And then the kind of touring, you know, and I think Dave said, oh, you're up for doing a tour, you know, well, I'm still working for the MU, and I did a tour. And then I thought, well, you know, what am I? I'm now 60, you know, I've done this for like a dozen years. With in-ear monitors, I can handle being on stage for an hour and a half. You know, I keep everything really low volume. So I thought, well, sod it, let's go back for where I started. So, you know, I went back to the Damned, and then 6 months later, bloody COVID hit. I wasn't banking on that one.
This is the last question then. So you've got a free evening and you can call any one of your former bandmates to go for a beer. Who are you calling for a beer?
I'd probably call Steve Nicol, actually. He was the Hot Rods drummer.
Why so?
Probably because everything was new and shiny and exciting, and the world was at our feet. And we both used to share a room together in the early days. How can I put it? We had fun. So it'd be nice to kind of reminisce about the, we've done a few Hot Rods reunions over the last few years. Unfortunately, either when members have died, or just before members have died, Dave Higgs, our original guitarist, and Barry have gone, bless them. So that was good to do. And it's always been, we've never had any rehearsals before. We just gone on and we picked up where we left off 40 years ago. It's incredible. So that kind of bonding is, you can't really explain it. So yes, Steve was always great fun. And we being a rhythm section together and touring the world at 17. I think he was a year or two older than me. Yeah, probably Steve. In fact, I can't think of many people I wouldn't call up, actually. I mean...
What about Andrew Ridley? Give him a call?
Probably not.
Paul, thank you for giving up so much of your time, and I've really enjoyed this chat. And it's been grand. And thank you for the gardening. Seriously, it helps me so much. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, good. All right, no worries, Liam.
We've been crying now for much too long, and now we're gonna dance to a different song. I'm gonna scream and shout to my dying breath. I'm gonna smash it out till there's nothing left. Ooh, smash it up! Smash it up, smash it up!
Thank you so much to Paul for giving up his time and talking to me. Now I want you to give up 2 seconds of your time and go give this podcast a rate and review on whatever podcast streaming service you are using. It really does help the podcast grow. Also, why not WhatsApp this episode to 5 of your mates who are big damn fans and tell them your life depends on this, and also so does our friendship. Make it that stark. We're living in times where shit is happening that whereabouts is kind of raising our tension. So why not threaten your friendship over a substandard podcast? Very quickly, thank you so much to Jake here for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. If you don't know about Jay, I spoke to him in previous episodes. He does fantastic work with his organization No Sweat and also Punk Ethics. He is putting on a fantastic show at the 100 Clubs to raise awareness for punks against sweatshop. A great initiative whereabouts we are trying as a collective to stop touring bands from using sweatshop workers who are creating t-shirts for bands. Go and support them if you can. Go pick up your tickets for their 100 Club show. One of my favorite comedians of all time, Mark Thomas, is performing. Sadly, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it due to work commitments, but I will be there in spirit. So go pick up your tickets now. There will be a link in the episode description of this podcast. Right, I'll be back soon enough. If you're lucky enough to be going to a punk show like the 100 Club, go to that show and you see someone fall down, you pick them right back up again. Until next time, bye-bye.